What's up, guys? Welcome back to the 31st and second last episode of this 32 in 32 series where I preview every team's 2025 offseason going from the bottom all the way towards the top. Last episode I did was on the Dallas Stars, who lost in the conference final. Today is the team that beat them in that series and the Stanley Cup finalists, the Edmonton Oilers. So after a decade of darkness in Edmonton, where the Oilers, I think, missed the playoffs for like 9 or 10 straight seasons, they accumulated a lot of good young players over the years. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Nail Yakupov, Taylor Hall, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid was the big prize, however, in 2015. He's hoping to be that generational talent that will get them over the top. And it took them quite a few years for the Oilers to actually, they made the playoffs, I think, in year 2 of McDavid, but it took them a few years for them to really get to the level of a contender. And they got Mattias Ekholm in 2023, and they were hoping he was going to be that big shutdown defenseman. And obviously he's been a very effective guy. They gave $9 million to Darnell Nurse. Obviously was not worth it. So a bunch of bad cap management. Obviously Ekholm is not a bad cap man. Is a very good acquisition, but Nurse is pretty bad. It really just made that this team didn't have enough money to go get a goaltender, to get more forward depth, and it led that they have some flaws. However, they made the Stanley Cup final in back-to-back years now. They lost last year in 7 games to Florida, and yet again they played the Panthers. Unfortunately, they lost. Now after that, you have Leon Draisaitl at $14 million. That's his first year of his contract, going to be kicking in next year after only making $8.5 million. Evan Bouchard was making $3.9 million over the last 2 years. Now he's going to be making probably a raise to like $8 or $9 million. And that's also Connor McDavid's last year under contract, 12.5. He's probably going to want to be the highest paid player around 15, 16 million at least. So yeah, the Oilers, when you lose back-to-back in the final, it's pretty hard to get back to that level. So now the question is their window closing? So the Oilers finished 9th overall in the National Hockey League, 3rd in the Pacific Divisions. They weren't a dominant regular season team, but they had some inconsistent stretches. Their general manager, Stan Bowman, who was hired towards the end of last summer, after all the main offseason moves, it was him, however, that let Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg leave via offer sheet to the St. Louis Blues. I think that was a pretty big mistake, especially for Holloway, who I think would have been exactly the type of player that the Oilers would have needed in these playoffs. At the deadline, went to go get Jake Wellman for his first-round pick, who was a pretty good fit on Edmonton, but some big decisions gonna have to happen over the next few years. Obviously, not the greatest reputation considering what happened in Chicago. Chris Knoblauch's been there for the last 2 years, gone to the final back-to-back years. Obviously, Connor McDavid's former coach and junior. I think he'll be there as long as McDavid's there at least, and then we'll see. They finished with 101 points this year. Goals for per game, 11th. Goals against per game, 14th overall. Their power play only 12th. You would think that's like a top 2 power play in hockey. Their penalty kill was 16th. Their expected goals percentage at 5-on-5 was 4th. Their top 5 scorers, Leon Draisaitl led the charge in 71 games, 52 goals, won the Rocket Richard, and 106 points. Connor McDavid finished second on the team in scoring in 7 games only. However, he scored 26 goals and 100 points. Evan Bouchard in 82 games got 67 points, 14 goals. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in 78 games had a bit of a down year. He had 49 points. And Zach Hyman, after scoring over 50 goals last year, went down to 27 and 73 and 44 points. Stuart Skinner in 51 games, an .896 save percentage. And Calvin Pickard in 900 save percentage in 36 games. Pickard and Skinner were good enough to get them to the Stanley Cup final, but when you meet a team like Florida, you need some stellar goaltending, and unfortunately, they just weren't the guys for the job. You look at the Edmonton Oilers' projected line for the 25-26 season before their offseason moves. Obviously, they have a lot of expiring contracts, so as of right now, you have Nugent-Hopkins, McDavid, and Vander Kane, who came back after missing the whole year, was very effective in the playoffs. Podkolzin, Draisaitl, Arvidsson, Max Jones, Henrique, Savoy, Hamblin, Janmark, and Phillip. On defense, Ekholm, Bouchard, Nurse, Kulak, Wallman, and Stetcher, and Annette Skinner and Pickard. They only have about $11 million in cap space. It looks that they would have signed that by the now that Trent Frederick would have been signed over 8 years at around $4 million. Obviously, I think that's a pretty big mistake considering that he didn't do that much of since the acquirement of the deadline in the playoffs. An 8-year contract for a guy that had some injury problems, and $4 million for a team that has cap problems is kind of a problem. The other UFAs that they have, Corey Perry, who was very, very good for them in the playoffs. Obviously, not normal for a guy over at 40 years old to be on your first line, but he's a guy that they're probably going to want to bring back. Jeff Skinner, who signed a 1-year deal at $3 million. He's 33 years old. Didn't really fit well at Edmonton. That's probably a guy they're going to let go of. Connor Brown, I think this is a guy that you probably want to keep on your bottom 6. Very effective, very speedy. Kasperi Kapanen as well, who they signed midway through the season. Also, he's a guy that I think that brought some speed He's a guy that they're probably going to want to look at re-signing if they can. And John Klingberg, who they signed also midway through the season, brings a bit of puck moving ability, but I think they're probably going to look in a different direction. And Evan Bouchard's their only RFA. He's probably going to want to get an extension around $8 to $9, maybe even $10 million. So yeah, the Oilers' salary cap is a big issue right now. In your team that has salary cap problems, you got to look at cheaper, younger options. Matthew Savoie is probably their top prospect right now. He's probably going to be playing there on the Oilers next season. He's a guy that obviously was a 9th overall pick from Buffalo in 2022. They got him in exchange for Ryan McLeod last summer, who obviously was an effective player for the Oilers. Savoie could maybe become a second liner one day if all goes right. Sam O'Reilly, the 32nd overall pick in 2024, who they traded their 2025 first round pick in order to move up and get Sam O'Reilly. Personally, for a team that's competing for the Cup, I don't think Sam O'Reilly is this like game changer down the road. They would have probably been better using that to go get a player, an active player, in order to help this team get over the hump instead of using it on a prospect that is a B prospect. Boheki, Jarventi, and Rodriguez. So the Oilers, they don't have that much in the system. And like I said, their pick that they traded for O'Reilly's going to be 31st overall to Philadelphia. They don't have their first next year either because they traded it at the deadline for Jake Wallman. So the Oilers are in win now mode, but they don't have much cap space. They don't have many assets. They don't have many draft picks. They don't have many prospects. They're really in a position where it really feels like they missed out on their best opportunity at getting McDavid and Draisaitl their first Stanley Cup. All the limited resources that they have in order to improve their team, they still have some big weaknesses. Number one, I would say, is a top 4 shutdown defenseman. Matthias Ekholm, he's 35, I believe. He's getting older. Obviously, he missed a lot of time this year, injured, and he got to the final. He probably wasn't 100%, but he did look pretty bad. They're going to have to get a better option, maybe a guy to play with, like a guy like Darnell Nurse or with Jake Wallman, because they don't really have that, and they're very high-risk, high-reward type defense core. A starting goalie, Stuart Skinner, was good enough to get into the final, but maybe a guy that's more consistent. Calvin Pickard as well was decent as well, but they need a guy that is more consistent, doesn't have the ups and downs that Skinner has especially, and more forward depth. Obviously, a lot of free agents in their bottom 6. They're going to have to look at some cheaper options here that can fill in roles, but the Edmonton Oilers' depth is a question mark. Long-term, T.S. Ekholm at 35 years old needs to get replaced one day. That top 4 shutdown defenseman could be that successor if they want to go get that. It's going to be very tough, however, to find with the limited assets that they have. Starting goalie, that's still a question mark. Skinner is not that old, but again, it's still an issue. They don't really have a top goalie prospect in the system. They need some more youth and some more picks and some prospects in order to rejuvenate their prospect pool and maybe give a chance to the Oilers. Maybe in the next few years, they may not have a chance to win, but if they're able to re-sign McDavid, they have Draisaitl also locked up long-term in Bouchard. Maybe in 4 or 5 years, they let go of some of their bigger contract guys gone, and then they bring in some cheaper options, some younger options, and maybe they're able to rebuild a second window with McDavid and Draisaitl. The odds of that happening and working out are very slim, but that honestly at this point, that's probably the best way to go, because I'd really have a hard time imagining the Oilers getting back to the final again. Anything's possible. I actually doubted all the Oilers. I thought they'd lose in the first round to the LA Kings. They won in 6 after being down 2-0. I thought they'd lose against Vegas. They won in 5. I thought they'd lose against Dallas. They won in 5. So anything's possible with this team when you have a David and Draisaitl. However, their odds of winning a cup with these two guys over the next 3 to 5 years are very, very, very slim, unfortunately. All right, so that puts an end to this video. Let me know in the comments, what should the Edmonton Oilers do this summer in order to improve their team? Do you think they're able to go get the goaltender or defenseman and more forward depth? What do you think Connor McDavid's going to sign for? Do you think he'll even sign this summer, or he'll wait until next year? Do you think somehow he's going to decide to walk next summer, which honestly I'd be very shocked happens, but anything's possible in hockey. Don't forget to check out my previous 32 and 32 series videos, and the one that's going to be coming out tomorrow on the Florida Panthers, the Stanley Cup champions. And also don't forget to check out my off-season content that's going to be coming out over the next few months. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you again for another video. Ciao.